the basis for everything we do is what happens in your natural cycle, right? So when I was in medical school, I actually hated OBGYN and I hated reproductive endocrinology because they would put up this crazy chart of all the hormones and, FSH goes up and estrogen goes up and all this stuff. And it was very confusing. But the bottom line is every month you start with a group of resting eggs. Mm-hmm. Your brain makes a hormone called FSH.
Which I did not know that was your brain making that hormone. Yeah,
and that tells one egg to grow. As it grows, it matures. And then once it's mature, it tells your brain to make another hormone to help it ovulate. And then your body makes another hormone called progesterone to help implant an embryo if that egg meets a sperm and makes an embryo. And so what we're doing with egg freezing or with ovarian stimulation, whether you're freezing eggs or creating embryos, is we're just giving you more of that FSH so that those other little guys don't die off, right? Every month, your body only makes one of these eggs. The rest of them die off because they don't have enough FSH.
Right,
so we're just feeding them to grow and retrieving them and putting them in the freezer.
Welcome. I'm very excited to have our next guest on the podcast, and I want to tell you a little bit how we were connected, and I will let her share all her accolades. So Dr. Anate Brauer is our next guest, and how I was connected to her was I was blindly researching for this podcast, and I came across a Time article that had Sharon Covington quoted in that, and I blindly emailed her and reached out to her, and I think this is such a testament to the desire to cultivate more conversation, because very kindly she reached right back out to me, got on a phone call with me, and the whole time we're having conversation, she's like, "Do you have a doctor for your podcast?" I was like, "No, I need one. I'm looking. This is the very beginning stages." She's like, "I have the perfect person for you," and then probably right away emailed you, and got us connected, and then you very quickly reached back out to me, and then that is how we connected. So I'm so grateful, because I know you're very busy, but I'm so grateful to have you here. So, if you can share a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we can dive in.
Thank you. I'm never too busy to educate and talk about egg freezing or anything fertility. And I so appreciate you having me here. And I thank you all for joining us and taking this time. My name is Anate Brauer. I'm, as you know, a reproductive endocrinologist and fertility specialist, which means I spent 4 years doing an OBGYN residency, which I completed at Cornell, and then stayed on for 3 years to do a fellowship where we kind of learned about all things fertility, from surgery to the endocrinology behind it, to IVF, egg freezing, third-party reproduction, etc. I'm currently the IVF director at Shady Grove Fertility in New York. I'm also an ex-fertility patient. We'll talk about that.
Oh, okay. That's a piece I didn't know.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm a mom of 3 now, thank God. And I just really love what I do. And I think we're in a time now in medicine that as women, we should feel very lucky to have access to these technologies.
Yeah, I find that so incredible. Like, while I think there should be more conversation and more knowledge, and that's one of my questions for you, sort of this knowledge gap. But when I was freezing at 37, I didn't know. I knew only one woman that had done it. I didn't really know all of the options. So while I think the conversation is evolving for me at 37, almost 34, 30, no, don't age myself, 42. There was not much information out there. And, you have a great video on YouTube that I want to link in our show notes. And I don't want to spend too much time diving in on those logistics, because the video is great and explains it really well, because there's so much else to talk about. But even watching that video, there was still so much I didn't realize. Like, I didn't understand. I didn't know, the hormones, you hear the acronyms, but I really still learned even more watching that as someone that already went through freezing. So do you get that sense when patients come to you that there's still this gap in knowledge and understanding?
So it took me 17 years of school and training to learn how to explain it in, I think that video is like 6 minutes long or something.
Yeah, it's about 6 minutes, yeah.
And every new patient I have, every new patient consult, I kind of talk about the same things. So the basis for everything we do is what happens in your natural cycle, right? So when I was in medical school, I actually hated OBGYN and I hated reproductive endocrinology because they would put up this crazy chart of all the hormones, and, FSH goes up and estrogen goes up and all this stuff. And it was very confusing. But the bottom line is every month you start with a group of resting eggs. Mm-hmm. Your brain makes a hormone called FSH.
Which I did not know that was your brain making that hormone. Yeah.
And that tells one egg to grow. As it grows, it matures. And then once it's mature, it tells your brain to make another hormone to help it ovulate. And then your body makes another hormone called progesterone to help implant an embryo if that egg meets a sperm and makes an embryo. And so what we're doing with egg freezing or with ovarian stimulation, whether you're freezing eggs or creating embryos, is we're just giving you more of that FSH so that those other little guys don't die off, right? Every month your body only makes one of these eggs. The rest of them die off because they don't have enough FSH.
Right,
so we're just feeding them to grow and retrieving them and putting them in the freezer. And I think that basis of understanding what we're actually doing is really important, because when you talk to people about things like, people always say, well, I don't want to freeze my eggs because I don't want to inject myself with hormones, or I'm not going to do IVF because I don't want to inject myself. We're giving you what your brain's already making, just a little bit more of it to try to salvage those eggs from dying.
Yeah. And I again, watching your video, I didn't even realize that. And I think I'm just thinking about my own journey and the conversations with women. There's so much happening. You're so overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed with the decision. I don't even think I thought to say, hey, what is this medication? Like, what is this medication doing? I just kind of followed the steps. And one of the guests shared that she felt on a conveyor belt, that it's like you kind of go every morning, every other morning. And, is there anything being done? I what I liked about your profile also, it's very person-centered. Like, it sounds like you do a really good job of making women not feel that way.
Yeah.
But do you think that's kind of evolving or becoming more personal, where women, they might say, hey, here's how it goes, or here's what this medication is doing?
I think access, you started with the question of, do we have enough access to this knowledge? Are we talking about it enough? And of course, we could always be talking about it more. But I think from the time I graduated fellowship, which is 2013, to now, I mean, the conversation has evolved into a completely mainstream topic.
Yeah.
In all aspects of women's health. I mean, when I was young, I learned about a period in a Judy Blume book. My parents are both physicians. They're very conservative. Never talked about this stuff. And this is really important because now everything's being politicized, and we're not going to go there in today's we're not going to go
different
there.
podcast.
But, it's important even from the time people are young, to talk about these things and increase access. Just yesterday, I spoke at Baruch College in the city. And it was an Empower Me event. It's like they bring all these people to talk about different aspects of life and what to do with your future to empower, right? And so I spoke about all things fertility and all the different ways in which you can build a family. And I talked a lot about egg freezing and that. But it's afterwards, it was really cute. These 19 and 20-year-old girls were like, I never knew, that we're born with all the eggs we'll ever have. And maybe if I'm thinking about kind of a long-term career like you,
great. Yeah.
Maybe I should be So I think the conversation has started, and it's evolving, and it's, people like you who went through it and are brave enough to share your story here on a podcast in front of, I don't know how many millions of people, hopefully will access it, right? These are the people that are making change and increasing access to knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And it's kind of funny. I don't know if you watched the show, The Mindy Project, but she's also...
But I know, I've watched a couple episodes.
So she has part of, some of the episodes are her going to colleges promoting egg freezing. And I thought that was kind of...
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Brilliant.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I thought that was so...
That's what I did yesterday.
Yes. But no one was... That's so great and just say that to say it's so great that that's happening now, because I know I wish I knew about it sooner.
Right.
I think at 35, I was starting to consider that, but it wasn't a conversation. There wasn't... I don't even remember. I froze at Extend Fertility. I don't even know how I landed there.
Yep.
So that's amazing to hear.
It's true. And it's important... It's a little bit of a double-edged sword because... And we'll probably get into this later, but at the same time, we don't want to pressure people to have to do. We don't want to pressure people to say, you you're 33 and you haven't frozen your eggs. Like, what's wrong with you? Know what I mean? Because it's a very personal decision. It's also expensive. We'll touch on that a little later too. And so you just want to be equipped with the knowledge. You want to know what your baseline egg count is, just to have an idea, just to give yourself options to be able to plan. And just because you walk into an office of a fertility doctor doesn't mean you're automatically doing treatment. You know, I see patients every day who, you know, they just want to come in to get knowledge, right? So it's different if I'm talking to a 28-year-old who her whole life is in front of her and she has an amazing ovarian reserve, she has an amazing egg count. She can wait a little bit of time, right? Versus someone who's, you know, maybe 33, who's still single, who hasn't met that person yet, who's, you know, in medical school and residency, and I know they're going to have another few years ahead of them. That patient may want to freeze, you know.
So will you make that recommendation? Later. Would you say to the 33-year-old, hey, this might be a good time to really get more serious about this decision? Okay.
Yes. And likewise with the 29-year-old or the 28-year-old, if she has, let's say, a lower ovarian reserve, right? The first step is testing. And what do you do for testing? There's a blood test. It's called AMH, anti-Mullerian hormone, which is a hormone that's made by the small resting eggs in the ovary. And so the more eggs you have, the more AMH you make. And it really helps me to predict if I'm going to give you medications to retrieve eggs and freeze them, how many eggs am I going to get? And so if a 28-year-old comes to me and has like an amazing through the roof AMH, I'm going to say, you know what? Not much is going to change in the next year or so. Maybe you'll meet someone. Maybe you'll see what happens. You can wait. The other part of the equation is not just quantity, right? It's quality.
Yes.
So
you
quality is genetics of the eggs, which is directly linked to age. And as we get older, you know, not only do we lose our eggs, but our eggs age, right? And they are less likely to get fertilized and more likely to lead to a miscarriage, a genetically abnormal embryo. And so that number kind of goes down over time. So at 33, between 30 and 34, around half your eggs are chromosomally abnormal.
Oh
right?
my gosh. Well, that was another question of mine because I keep hearing like 35 is like the cliff.
The cliff.
And I just listened to another podcast. They call it like the race to 35, and it's two women that turn 35 that are freezing their eggs. And so I think that's a major concern. The age is a major concern. Right. And I think for a lot of women, there's stuff you can't plan. A lot of women that are going to be on this podcast didn't expect to be, and myself included, 34 and single and kind of with this uncertainty in front of them. So no one's going to turn into a pumpkin when they're 35, right? I always tell I have patients sitting in front of me. I just turned 35. I said, and you're not a pumpkin. You know? If someone were to ask me what's the best time to get pregnant, I'm going to say in your 20s. Right. They told me that too.
Yes. But our social calendar is not in sync with biology. And as much as technology progresses, we cannot change biology. So do I think you're going to turn into a pumpkin at 35? No. But even, 30 to 34, at 34 is when we start seeing declines in pregnancy rates with our IVF population, right? Which indicates quality kind of slowly going down. And so I don't think anything magically happens at 35. I would say to you, if you're considering freezing eggs and you're serious about it, the sooner you do it, the better, right? I see a lot of things out there that say, oh, the magic number for doing it is 33. Like, I hear that a lot. Like, if you're 33 or 34, like, that's the magic age to do it. I don't think that's true. I think that the reason we think of 32 and 33 and 34 as this, like, sweet spot is because I look at it when I talk to a patient, I look at a few things. How old are you? What's your AMH level? Where are you in your life as far as when do you think you're going to start to try to conceive, and how many children do you want?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Those are the things, right? Because if you're 33 and you only want one child and you're engaged and you're getting married next year and you're going to try 6 months later, like, all right.
Yeah, you might not.
Fine.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, you may not ever use these eggs, right? But if you're 33 and you have a borderline AMH and you want 4 kids and you're single, like, don't wait till you're 34.
So it's really patient specific, right? Because one of the questions I think women ask a lot is how many eggs do I need? But it really sounds patient specific, based on your goals, based on your levels.
Yes. It is. As far as the $1 million question of how many eggs do I need to make a baby, there's data now based on this. So SGF, so I'm part of SGF, which is a very, very large, I'm in New York, but we've been around for about 30 years now, and we're the largest fertility center. It started as this little clinic in Maryland.
Wow.
And is now the largest fertility center in the country.
Wow.
So we have a lot of data of babies that have come from frozen eggs. It's not just a matter of being able to freeze the eggs. You have to make the babies from them right at the end of the day. So one of my partners, Dr. Doyle, he's in Maryland. He published a paper in Fertility and Sterility that basically took all of our, at that time, egg thaw data and worked backwards to say, at this age, how many eggs do you need in the freezer, right, to have a really, really good chance of having a baby from those eggs? And in our 30 to 34-year-olds, we found that if you have 20 mature eggs in the freezer, right, not 20 retrieved.
I'm going to listen and do the math for myself.
Yeah, not all eggs that have been retrieved will be mature, as you know.
Right.
So if you have 20 mature eggs in the freezer, it gives you about an 85 to 90% chance of having the first baby from those eggs, and about a 50 to 60% chance of having the second.
Oh, okay.
And even about a 30% chance of having the third from those 20 eggs if you're 30 to 34.
Okay.
The older you are, the more you need. So, for example, my 37 to 40-year-olds need 30 eggs.
For one?
Not for one, for the same numbers.
Oh, okay.
Right, those same numbers.
Okay.
And so, I mean, nowadays, egg freezing is just a lot more efficient. It's like, we compare it to women of the same age going through that are having a fresh IVF cycle, right? If you're 35 and you have 10 eggs retrieved, you have about a 50% chance, 50 to 60% take-home baby rate from those 10 eggs, right, about. And that's kind of how we extrapolate the numbers. Of course, the more the merrier.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful. I have some patients who I have to, I had one patient who was not going to be happy until she had, 40 eggs in the freezer at 8. She was young. I mean, you don't really need 40 eggs in the freezer.
Wow.
But I mean, that's what she wanted. So you really have to kind of balance these things.
Yeah.
And as a physician, I think it's important to have those open conversations. I even feel like fertility specialists I feel like everyone's focused on the imminent baby. And you really have to focus on how are you going to feel complete? How is your family going to be complete? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? And really plan for that.
Yeah, that's amazing that's the conversation. It was not a conversation that I was a part of when I was going through my journey. I went to another fertility doctor that legitimately just didn't even listen to me. I was sharing that, Rob and I were not aligned yet. And I was just wanted to understand the information and my numbers. And he's like, just have a baby right now. I'm like, not what I'm talking about.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's hard. And I see that every day. By the way, I have patients coming to me for various reasons to freeze eggs, married patients who are like, my husband's not ready yet. I just need to put some in the freezer for the future. The pandemic has really kind of pushed this along. I mean, we lost 2 years of our lives. Think about being 32 or 33 at the start of the pandemic, right?
Yes, yeah.
You can't date for 2 years.
I know, that was so hard for so many of my clients.
You wake up one day and you're 35 years old. And you're like, what just happened to my life, you know? And so I see that so much. I still see that a lot. And then also with regards to age, people always ask me, well, how late is too late?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a really hard question because at the end of the day, what we're doing is invasive, right? And it's expensive if you don't have coverage. And so you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is a good investment. Right? I would never want to mislead anyone. So it used to be that we would just say 40 is too late to freeze your eggs, right? Because at 40, over 90% of your eggs and therefore embryos are chromosomally abnormal. So you really need a lot in the freezer to give yourself a really good chance
of even one.
But my perspective is if you have a decent ovarian reserve and I can retrieve some eggs, like you may not get to your 30 that you need.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I feel like some women, for, the hope, right? And the reassurance purposes, you have to just take a step back and say, all right, I know that my chances are very low, but I'm never going to forgive myself if I don't put something in the freezer. If that's you, then work with your doctor to, now there's some cases where, if someone's 45 and they have an undetectable AMH, meaning like it doesn't matter how much medication I'm going to give them, I'm only going to retrieve one egg, that's not a good investment.
Yeah.
And as a physician, I feel like that's misleading to the patient because they're undergoing invasive procedures, anesthesia, egg retrievals. They're paying thousands of dollars for a success rate. We can never say zero as doctors,
but low.
As close to zero as possible. And for me, as a physician, I feel like that, my first rule is do no harm. And I feel like that has the potential.
How
to
is
do
that
harm.
for you to sort of give that?
Terrible.
I know I must. Oh
It is
God,
the worst.
it
It is the worst part of what I do. And the hardest part is that most of these women are highly functional and successful.
Oh, yes.
And that's why they're now at this age and so and still and I see it in myself too. I mean, I too will get into this.
Yes,
but
I
was
want to hear your
diagnosed with
journey.
a decreased ovarian reserve, and I really, it threw me into.
And how old were you?
I was 33. Actually,
33.
I was young,
Okay.
which is good because I was young, but it's bad because it was so low for my age.
Yeah.
And so I understand it from that perspective of these women, I have done everything right in my life. The rest of my life, all my other goals have been, okay, if I do A, B, and C, I'm going to get what I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the one thing that we just don't have control over. And the one, most people in our field are well-meaning, but I do feel like sometimes there's a business developed around this desperation.
Oh, what a word.
We,
what
as
a word.
women, feel, right, inherently. And it's bothersome to me, that I can tell a patient, I don't think this is a good investment for you. I don't think it's the right thing to do medically. And I always say to them, I'm like, we're in New York City. You will find someone to do this for you. Do you know what I mean? And they do.
That's got to be so hard.
And
I
it's
experience
hard.
that in my field too, where I'll have, similar feeling where I'll have clients come to me and they'll, one of the things I ask is, do you have previous therapeutic experience? And they'll tell me some of the things. And I'm just like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
It's hard.
It's really hard.
Yeah. So
Desperation is a great word. Yeah. And, it's interesting because you're touching on a lot of the things that clients have already, and now I'm in my therapy mind, my guests have talked to me about, and feeling what is the financial gain? How is that being sort of taken advantage of?
Yeah. I do think I am concerned about our industry, we talked about access and how much more everyone's talking about egg freezing and fertility. Our field, when I was a fellow, Zev Rosenwax, who was is a godfather of IVF, would always say, our field, more than any other field, has the potential to change society.
Wow.
If you think about it, more than any other field of medicine.
Yeah.
Right? People are delaying childbearing. There's lots of different ways to build a family. The biological clock is being frozen. I mean, all of these things. But there's a huge responsibility that comes with that.
Yeah.
And there's a slippery slope, right? And it's really up to us to protect that.
Yeah, and such a vulnerable, and I'm relating a lot with my own work, just such a vulnerable population. Like they're coming to you with, we said desperation, but hardship and trauma, and we have a real responsibility to create safety and do no harm, like you said. And some people in my field don't do that, and that's quite upsetting. But we really see people in their most vulnerable moments, and to have that support or have a doctor say to you, okay, let's talk through the goals. Let me give you all the information, and here's what I think. Like, you're not just a number. It's just not about, number of eggs or hormone levels. Like, who are you as a person?
Yes.
What do you want?
Right. And what do you want? What's going to make you feel complete? I think that's the goal.
Yeah. I want to dive in quickly to some things that some guests have expressed, and friends, who I've had conversations with, confusion on, And I think you brought this up earlier, like the rules, or like what can we do? Couple things. The rules, like what can or cannot do when you're egg freezing.
Yep.
I heard on this podcast, I heard these two women that were doing it together. One doctor said, you can have wine. Another doctor said, you can't have wine. One doctor says, you can work out. Another says, don't work out. And I think I know some of these are coping mechanisms for women, and to feel like you might have to put those on pause while you go through this very
absolutely
stressful.
So I'm a doctor of moderation. And our field is so interesting because I feel like people have such convictions in their beliefs, and everyone thinks they're right, but at the end of the day, nobody knows who's really right and who's wrong, right? So we'll talk about lifestyle. So for example, things like diet, right? So you can go on YouTube and find fertility doctors that tell you to only eat meat.
Oh, wow.
And you can find fertility doctors that tell you to only eat plants. I'm here to say you should be eating both.
Yeah.
Have a balanced diet. We always our goal as a society, right, is to kind of go towards a Mediterranean diet, right? So,
oh my God, I'm hearing this all the time now.
Proteins, but this is just for our own personal health. Anyway, if I were to reduce anything, it would be refined sugars, which we should be reducing anyway in our diets. And so that's the dietary perspective. As far as alcohol and caffeine, which I'll just put together, I think having a glass of wine here and there is fine.
Yeah.
I used to have a nurse in my old practice, Karen Seawitch, if she's out there listening. She's just this amazing woman. And she would say, before you give your shot, she's from Queens, she has this accent, take a sip of wine, and I'm fine with that. I mean, a glass of wine here or there with dinner is totally fine. Do I condone binge drinking? No. Same with caffeine, a cup or two of coffee a day. Even in pregnancy, you can have up to 200 milligrams, right?
Yeah.
The only absolute no-no is smoking of any kind.
Yeah.
Marijuana.
Oh, weed too. Okay.
Tobacco, that's my big no-no. As far as exercise, I am definitely a believer of activity. I think it's so important for me. I use exercise for mental purposes.
Yes.
If I don't
people.
exercise, I can't function. And that's really hard for my patients. So I say you can still exercise, but when your ovaries start to get bigger, right? So about a week in, when you start taking that third shot, the cetrotide or the ganirelix that keeps them from ovulating.
I forget all the things.
So there's about a week in where they're going to tell you to take a third injection. That's when I tell my patients, okay, take it down a notch, nothing high impact. If you do Pilates or yoga, no inverted movements. And that's because as the eggs get bigger, the ovaries get heavier and they can twist on themselves. It's called an ovarian torsion, and it cuts off the blood supply.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we don't want that.
No.
And so that's why we tell people to take it down a notch. But I still think, you can do brisk walking, you can do spinning, just none of the spinning jumps, don't feel like a loser at your soul cycle class.
Well, I like what you say, moderation, and it just sounds too, just overall, not just when you're egg freezing, is to practice moderation. It's really healthy, and being able to continue these stress relieving activities.
We do not live in a society of moderation.
No, we don't. We definitely don't.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on, because this is another real barrier and real stressor for women during this time or considering this decision, is finances.
Yes.
And that's a really big one, and that's come a lot in my conversations. And even for myself at 37, I still wasn't in a financial position to drop thousands and thousands of dollars on this. And not only not having that money, thinking, well, what is this money even going to do for me? Right. If I spend all this money, it's not instant gratification.
Yes.
Even if I got 14 eggs at 37, but even having the 14 eggs, I'm like, is this money well spent? I don't even know. Right. And for me, the options at the time, and I know you shared with me a program that I'd love for you to share here that you guys recently rolled out. The options were a loan or a no interest credit card. And those were my two options to afford this.
So one thing that I am seeing more and more, which is great, is coverage. Coverage has significantly increased. Employers are beginning to understand that this is what people are looking for. If you want to hire a successful young female, employee, they're going to be asking for this. I mean, this is what everyone's talking about now. Yeah. So I highly recommend for any employers out there that you offer this, right? So I wrote an article for Forbes about how to ask your employer for benefits. I speak regularly at various, law firms, private equity firms. Like, these women are, should be very empowered to get this coverage. And nowadays, it's not just about commercial insurance coverage, but a lot of employers will have a separate family planning stipend for their employees.
Oh, wow, great.
Or they will have, third-party benefits. Now there's all these companies doing third-party fertility benefits like, Progeny, Carrot, Maiden, Win Fertility, Stork Club. I mean, every day there's another one, right?
Wow.
This is increased options for employees, and I strongly suggest that if you don't have coverage, that you band together with your colleagues and get it. And I've seen that happen with my patients. Okay. For those that don't have that option, it's hard because it's not just the cycle, it's the medication.
The medication. I remember I had found an old note where I wrote down the cost.
Yes.
And the medication was close to the cost of the procedure.
Correct. And what's interesting about IVF is that cost of IVF has significantly come down over the years, but the cost of medication has not changed.
It's the same.
Zero.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Because it's a little bit, I don't want to call it a monopoly, it's a duopoly, right? It's basically two companies that make all the fertility drugs. Right? It's like Ferring versus Serono.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's the problem there. We do have some creative programs. So we do have a financing program, fine. But within our egg freezing programs, based on that study that I mentioned, that you need 20 eggs at 30 to 34 and 30 eggs at 37 to 40, we have what's called the Assure program. So at SGF, you can do one straight up cycle and just, pay for one cycle and see how you do. Or if you have an AMH of greater than 1, so 1 is like the cutoff of what's considered a relatively normal AMH level.
Okay.
So if you have an AMH of greater than 1, or you have at least 10 follicles, you can do one of the Assure programs, which means, for example, with Assure 20, you have up to 4 retrievals to get 20 mature eggs in the freezer.
Oh, wow.
And the cost of the package is a little under what 2 retrievals would cost.
That's amazing.
So when I counsel my patients, I talk to them about, let's say I have a 34-year-old that has an amazing AMH, right? Let's say her AMH is like 5, and I expect to get at least 20 eggs with one cycle. I'm going to say, I don't think you need to do Assure.
Right.
Just pay for one cycle.
Yeah.
We'll get your 20 eggs.
Yeah.
But if I have someone with an AMH of anywhere from 1 to, let's say, 3, it's probably going to take them more than one cycle to get there.
Yeah.
And if it ends up taking more than 2 cycles to get there, they're going to pay a ton more money if they were just paying one cycle at a time.
Yeah.
Right? So those are the patients that benefit from that. On the back end, we have something called shared risk. That's basically, it applies to like most of our IVF programs, but you can also use it if you froze your eggs with us. So let's say you freeze your eggs, come back in a few years, you end up having to do IVF, and you decide to use those eggs to create embryos for IVF. If you do shared risk, which is, I hate the word guarantee, but it's our guarantee program, and those eggs don't make a baby, or if you have at least 10 eggs in the freezer with us, and you use them for IVF and they don't make a baby, and you paid up out of pocket for the IVF part of it, you get that back.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, you don't get the egg freezing part back, but you get the IVF part back. The thawing, the ICSI, So when I first came to SGF, right, I trained at Cornell for 7 years, and I was at NYU for 7 years, and then I came to SGF. But SGF I've known about the company for a very long time. I thought that was crazy. Like, you're going to pay people back if their eggs don't work in the lab? Like, what is that about, But it's pretty amazing.
It's amazing.
It means that you believe in your technology at the end of the day. One of my colleagues, from my former job, we would always joke, like the young people would always joke, we're freezing all these people's eggs. Like, this is back before there was a lot of thaw data.
Yeah.
Like, I hope it works, because like all the older guys are going to be on the ski slopes in Aspen, and we're going to be sitting here like holding the bag. Like, but now we know that it works,
Yeah, it's incredible.
And this is an opportunity to kind of put your money where your mouth is and say, you know what, if it doesn't work, you're going to get your money back.
Yeah, and I think things are like that are so great to ease the emotional stress or the uncertainty of, will this work, will this not work? And that did not exist when I was going through.
Yeah. But it's still cost prohibitive for a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Yeah, I have a client of mine who has Prodigy, and you know, having that benefit is the only reason she's doing it. So without
and we're seeing
it,
that a lot.
Yeah.
Every day I have people come in. I wasn't going to do this, but now I have coverage, so I'm doing it. You know, another subset of patients who we just rolled out a program for a few weeks ago is our female physicians.
You told me that. This is the program that you told me about. Yeah,
so,
I think this is incredible too.
Specifically, women who are in surgical subspecialties. So there was a paper, I mean, for many, many years, we all know, all of us on the other side know that female physicians delay childbearing by X number of years. We're more likely to have complicated pregnancies, et cetera. But no one like actually showed the data. So in 2021, there's a paper published in JAMA that basically said females in surgical subspecialties have a higher rate of infertility, obstetrical complications, smaller, number of children, et cetera, et cetera. And so we set out to my colleague, one of my partners in Atlanta, Valerie Libby, who froze her eggs 6 times in residency.
Wow.
Yeah. We set out to say, and a lot of these programs don't have coverage.
So she paid out of...
Well, I mean, I think she had a very lovely mentor that helped her out, but yeah, she paid. And so we were highly motivated to come up with a significantly discounted program for our surgical residents, which we have since rolled out. We have a similar program for our cancer patients. So I see a ton of young patients who are, this is not elective, right? This is now medical. Now we're getting into medical egg freezing, right? So people freeze their eggs electively, but they also freeze because they have a diagnosis of cancer and they're about to undergo chemo, which is toxic to the ovaries. We have a similar program for those patients. I feel like a cancer patient should pay nothing.
I agree.
Personally.
I agree.
Yeah, so.
This is something also personal. I had my ex-boyfriend prior to meeting Rob was stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he was so sick when they found out he was that sick, when he was that sick. And they completely forgot to tell him to freeze any sperm. And so I still don't know to this day. I think, he didn't because they missed that opportunity. And I want to assume.
Yeah. That's so hard.
Yeah.
That conversation is one that has taken a long time to evolve as well. Now it's a regular conversation, at least on the coasts. Like most New York oncologists will definitely talk to their patients about.
They didn't even.
But it's not the case everywhere. Because there's still a lot to educate about.
Yeah, right. As much as this is evolving, right? There's more data, there's more information, there's more conversation, there's more benefits, there's still room.
There's still a gap.
Yeah.
For sure.
One more question on finances. That everything's on Instagram now. There's all these influencers. And I came across an influencer that went abroad to freeze her eggs because of cost. I just was curious about your thoughts on that. So
it's so funny you say that. I think I mentioned to you that I consulted on an egg freezing musical.
Yes,
Did we talk about this?
Yes.
So it happened in this, like, I feel like the universe brings people together. Like, and so a friend of a friend was at a yoga retreat in Tulum and was talking about her theater and arts festival. And basically it's this really cool festival in New York where it's not theater and arts, it's science and theater festival. And every year they present 3 different shows that are linked to something in science. And so this year they had a playwright from Shanghai who herself froze her eggs.
Wow.
And wrote a musical. It's actually a really hilarious musical. About these 2 women. They both are from China, but one still lives in China, one lives in the U.S., and it's the night of their 35th birthday.
Oh, 35.
And before the clock strikes midnight, they wish to go back in time to when they were 34 so that they could have frozen their eggs at 34.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
Okay, but the whole premise is all about different places around the world where you can freeze your eggs and all the reproductive rights and laws like surrounding them. And there's one scene actually that takes place in a travel agency in Shanghai. And it's this woman singing to this group of girls about all the different places in the world you can freeze your eggs and what the rules are surrounding them, right? For example, in China, you can't freeze your eggs. You can't thaw your eggs unless your husband lets you. Well, what's the point of freezing your eggs if you're waiting for... Anyway, this is what I mean. So my view on that is I still believe that technology is not created equal. And you have to be very careful with that. It's actually, you have to have a good doctor, right? You don't want a doctor that's going to like misdose you or not know how to do an egg retrieval, you know what I mean? All these things. But really it's about the lab, and the lab is all about the technology. And a lot of people can say they're freezing eggs, but you have to be able to make babies from those eggs. So you want to go to a lab that has thaw data. So if somebody finds a
that's
lab
really great
that
to
has
know.
thaw data in Timbuktu, like that's good, you know,
Well,
fine.
that brings up way more questions.
Yeah, so that's one thing.
Yeah.
You want to make sure wherever you're going is not just, and by the way, technology is expensive, right? So usually when something is significantly less expensive,
It's a flag.
there's a reason for that,
yeah.
right? You have to pay embryologists. You want to have enough embryologists in the lab to do witnessing. Like we have a double witnessing, plus we have a witnessing system, RI Witness. It's like an electronic witnessing system. All of these things, the best incubators, the best
Oh my gosh.
media,
wow.
like all of these things are expensive. The other problem with freezing internationally, you're going to have to find a place to thaw those eggs.
Internationally.
You're going to have to, if you want to bring it back to the US
yeah.
and create an embryo here, where do you want your baby to be born, you know?
Right.
And so a lot of labs in the US will not accept eggs from other countries.
Okay. What about eggs from other, so for me personally,
other centers.
Right, from other
Yeah.
centers.
My view on egg freezing is that you should really thaw your eggs wherever they were frozen. That's what I believe. You don't want to start moving them around. The lab where you froze them is most familiar with the technology. Have them thaw and create the embryos. You can always move the embryos around. But I mean, in general, that's my view on freezing and thawing. At SGF for 28 years, we didn't accept from anybody else. When I came with Dr. Singer, my partner, you know, we came with practices. So people wanted to bring their embryos. People wanted to bring their eggs. And so we slowly started accepting. SGF has also acquired many clinics over the years. And so we had to put something in place, a process in place to accept. So we now accept, but they undergo a very rigorous risk management process. And by the way, the reason that most labs in the U.S. will not accept eggs coming from outside the U.S., it's all about chain of custody and liability. Who has handled the eggs? You have to show on a trail in the lab, this egg went from this person to this person, this person. It's definitely this person's egg or this person's embryo because that's everything of what we do.
Right.
It's like the crux of what we do.
Yeah.
And so I would not recommend freezing internationally because at the end of the day, you want to make sure the technology is sound and you want to make sure you're going to be able to thaw them and make babies from them. Here, where you want to raise your child.
Thank you so much for being here because you're sharing so much, even more like that hasn't come up in my own conversations, that my own knowledge. I do want to wrap up here because there is so much more to talk about. I want to save some other questions for next episode and get into the emotional component. And so let's save the rest for next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is amazing. God, I could sit here all day with you. And I've learned so much in this last 45 minutes.
Thank you.
This is incredible.
Me.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.